Good day, flight simmers. Today we're going to take a look at the TBM 930 cockpit and do an overview. So for starters, we have on the top here a safety master warning, which will come on right now. It's red because we have the parking brake on, and if there's any other issues like oil pressure, etc., you're going to get a warning. This is your safety master caution, and that'll also come on if there's a caution. Right here we have a standby attitude module number 1, contains a standby attitude indicator, and right here we have a standby attitude module number 2, and it contains current, speed, and altitude. So we're sitting on the ground at the airport right now, waiting for our departure and our taxi. This is our primary flight display for the captain, PFD. It contains the primary instruments to successfully operate the aircraft, and over here we have also a primary flight display for the co-pilot, and it's slightly different settings on it. These are the default settings when you start the aircraft. This is the multifunctional display screen, MFD, and it contains engine status details and navigation map with your filed flight plan. It'll show up in here when we get in the air for you to follow. If you're on a GPS like we are, our settings here. I'm just going to click Control 4. So there's our landing gear. There's our throttle. These are our flaps. You can control that with your mouse. That's for takeoff, that's for landing. So just put those up again. Now, if you want to cut your engine off, you can go over here and pull it down, and you can also feather. So when you do a startup, you have to right click on this to get it to go over. Right click will get it back. You can, and then you would pull it down to feather or to cut off. So you can control it with your joystick or your mouse, but the joystick I find the easiest. This is your fuel tank selector. This is your manual override and our pitch trim. Parking brake is on. Turn that on and off just by clicking on it. So I'm just going to take a look out the front here. See how we're doing. We're sitting here fine. No issues. I don't want to make sure there's no aircraft in our way. I'm going to go over here and we'll take a look at this. You have these switches here. This is your airframe de-ice, your ice light, your prop de-ice, your windshield. So these you would put on for de-icing if you have an issue or you're flying into freezing rain, etc., or icing conditions. Your pitot, normally you would put those on just by flicking them up. This is your inert SEP switch. So the inert SEP switch, I'll just go over that for a second. In case you're wondering what it's for preventing foreign objects. Using the internal separator is much simpler than one might think. The function of the internal separator is to help prevent foreign object damage to the engine. So once you have that up, and that should be up for takeoff, landing, or if you're in icing conditions at higher altitudes. It is recommended to use it by energizing the separator when the aircraft is on the ground and during landing approach, as this will prevent FOD particles from entering the compressor section. So it's also fairly common to see ITT increase by about 6 to 8 degrees Celsius due to the air inlet entry restriction that occurs when you deploy this switch. So basically that's what the function of that is. Let's take a look here. We have a couple of screens here that are used a lot in some of the things that are of interest on these two screens. This displays the title of the current screen. So if I change it to multifunctional display, which is this screen, it'll change the title, and I can hit nav and it'll change the title to nav. So I go back here to the primary flight display home screen, and that's here. So when we want to make changes here, this is where we want to be. So if I hit nav source, you can see it's changing to LOC1, LOC2, and flight management system. So that's what we wanted on. We can also change that by clicking on here, this soft key for active nav. Okay, so this is your basic screen area. This is your button bar. It displays the system level buttons. This is your label bar. It displays the labels to show the status and current functions of knobs and soft keys when functions are available. And we have a larger knob up here, and it depends on what mode you're in here, what you've selected, what these dials will do. For example, if I select multifunctional display, this dial here, the small dial, it will zoom in and zoom out. You can click on map to look at traffic and make some different setting changes if you want. And this is your back button to go back again. This is for your traffic. When you click on that, you'll bring up the traffic map on your multifunctional display. It's already on this side. So get your map back, you just click map. For your weather, if you click that, you'll get weather. And I'm going to show you how to get the weather on this screen here. So to get the weather up here, I'm going to switch this over to multifunctional display rather than primary flight display screen by clicking there. And now if I click on weather and I click on it again, we can do the radar and click once more, turn the radar on, and also I have to click standby and I have to click weather. So right now there is no rain or precipitation, but if I change this, you'll be able to see how it does work. Take it off live weather and switch to rain, and let's just close that down. So now you can see the weather, and we'll go outside and have a look. You can see it's pouring out. So we are getting that weather showing up now. So that's something nice to have on when you're flying in IFR rules and you're in the clouds, heavy rain or icing conditions, etc. You'll have this information, which will be very useful to you in carrying out your flight. Here's your nav button down here. So in order to set your comms, you just click on there and enter your numbers. For your nav radio, this is your comm here. Click on that and you can change your comms. I'm not going to change them because they're being automatically handled by the co-pilot. But for your nav 1, let's say your frequency, that's the frequency you're looking for. You can control your frequency like this. So if it's 112.40, that would be how you do it. If it's 110.30, a little temperamental, each switch. Now an easier way to enter it is just to go 103, or let's just go backspace, 030, and you just transfer. So you can get it either way. There's your active frequency right now. So I'm going to go back, and we are going to go back here, and we'll go into this screen right here. So there was our map that we looked at. There's our traffic, our weather. Now direct to, if you want to type in direct to waypoint, you can do it that way, and you can just hit enter and then activate it. So if you want to check our flight plan, there's the flight plan that's entered. So I'm going to go up here again and go back to live weather. And we'll shut that rain off. Okay, so there's our flight plan, and just scroll down and look at all the waypoints. Now that flight plan I imported from Little Nav Map. So there's all the waypoints right there. Just close that down again. So you can enter, we don't have an altitude here. So I'm just going to show you what happens if you enter an altitude. So right now this is all set for 2500, I believe. Yeah. So if we select our altitude, which we're going to fly at, and for our flight plan that we set at 4000, just by scrolling on that altitude button. These have changed. So that's all set now, and I don't know if we set our, not yet, I don't believe. Before takeoff, you can set your vertical speed just by turning that on and scrolling up to get up 1000 vertical speed to that altitude, 4000, it'll shut off. So let's go back down here, and there's our flight plan. I'm going to go back and go through a few more things. So procedures, there's our procedures. Runway 6, an ILS approach at this airport here on our flight plan, Kilo Charlie Sierra Golf. Airport systems should be aircraft systems. For fuel, you can look at your fuel. For electrical, general information, weights and fuel, you can add and do some calculations there yourself if you want to get more complicated. Those are the defaults. And our lighting, and you can adjust it. Let's go back. Okay, so that covers these points.
If there's any
Utilities,
issues here, they'll show up in red.
weight, fuel, minimums.
Like doors are open,
640 for that
P-TODs aren't
runway,
working,
all
etc.
set. For the charts that are provided for our minimums on approach, and you hit enter, so you can enter that if you want. There's a timer. You can start a timer for your flight, so you can count down for your VOR flights mainly, I guess. And then we have our GPS status. And then we can hit setup. Set up avionics. I'm not going to get into that and start changing things, but you can make changes to your avionics settings. Go back to home. In order to get rid of your GPS status, you hit map and you're back there. And like I said, if you're on there, you can scroll in and scroll out. Now this little button here is for filling the screen with your map if you want, and this will get you back to a split screen for your radar. This is your flaps lever, so if you put your flaps down, I'll use my joystick right now. You can see that lever changing. So that's for landing. This is for takeoff on this aircraft, and this is up. So here's our rudder. So that's the setting for our rudder right now, and our elevators. So those have all been set in the pre-flight setup, and the autopilot will take care of those if you're using autopilot. All right, let's take a look at speed bugs. So speed bugs, I like to turn them all on, and now you have your V settings. So here we've got 124 knots is your Y, VY. That's the speed that will allow for the best rate of climb. 100 knots for your VX speed, which will allow for the best angle of climb. VR is your rotation is at 90. And your VAP is 85. So those are helpful when you're flying to refer to. So we'll go back and waypoints. So right now if we hit this, we'll see what the information is on this airport. And if you hit these right now, you'll get no intersection available. Nearest airport, if we go here, we can see our nearest airports, and you can scroll down to look at them. So you could pick one of these airports for your destination. Right now that is our destination, I believe. No, maybe not. And let's just go back and hit intersections. Now we have a lot of nearest intersections that you could select. Here's your VOR stations. Any of these, if you hit them, you can go direct to. So it's nice. VOR info. It gives you all the information you need. So you can, this is your frequency to get weather at these various airports. So you could make it active or standby. So you could set those up so you could get information as you approach. So a lot of information on these screens. NDB, non-directional beacon, or a non-directional radio beacon, is a radio beacon which does not include inherent directional information. Radio beacons are radio transmitters at a known location, and they're used as an aviation navigational aid. NDB are in contrast to directional radio beacons and other navigational aids such as low frequency radio range, VHF, omnidirectional range, VOR, and tactical air navigation system, TACAN. So there's different ones. You can click on them, you can fly direct to, you can get info, you can see them on the map. So it'll show you where it is, which is really helpful if you're trying to plan a VOR type flight or an NDB type flight, because I'll go back once again to the VOR, and once again you can do the same thing. It shows in nautical miles where they are, so I'll click on this one and I'll show VOR info. There's your information and your frequency, and then if I click on it again, I can show it on the map. So it's right here off to our left. So they're helpful if you wanted to program them in and fly direct to them and create a VOR type flight. So I'm going to go back again here, and you can change how you want your map to show up, or you can turn it right off from here. You can also do it with the soft keys here. So it's a matter of preference what you like. Personally, I kind of like the map inserted here. So that's quite a bit of information on there. This area here in the cockpit is the automatic flight control system, the AFCS controller. So we have various dials and switches that we can press. So there's your barometric pressure. You can adjust it. You can see it's changing there, and I'm going to reset it just by hitting B. We've got live weather, so it'll set it to the correct barometric pressure. You see our altitude change there. This is our heading knob. So right now it's here. If we wanted to point in the direction of the aircraft, you just right click on it and it'll immediately went up to there. And then if you want to adjust it, change it, you can see it's changing here. So you can change your heading. So if you have it on autopilot, it's going to fly on that heading. So this is the approach mode button. That's our nav button. This is our CRS1. That's our half bank mode button, autopilot, yaw damper. That's our transfer autopilot, level mode. That's off right now. That's our altitude, and this will set the altitude like we showed earlier by scrolling on it. Vertical speed up. This is our vertical navigation switch, and our flight level mode, speed, knots or Mach, and a CRS2 and another barometric pressure. So let's go look at the primary flight display here. So what we have on this is soft keys at the bottom, and we can change zoom in and zoom out on the map. This is our PFD map settings, set to all, traffic, absolute, and this is set to off. So those you can turn that on or off. This switch will get you back to where you were. This is traffic insert, so you can change that screen to traffic insert, and that screen's off now, so we can go down here and turn it back on. This is the OBS soft key here. So if I click and turn that on, you can see OBS lights up here. And if I turn it off, it disappears. So every IFR GPS receiver offers a button to permit OBS mode selection. And once that choice is made, the GPS unit begins to act very much like a VOR receiver. When the OBS on the VOR head is twisted to a desired course, the needle and flag respond exactly as if there were a VOR station at the location of the selected waypoint. At this point, you can think of the waypoint as a virtual VOR, and as you intercept the chosen course, the needle centers, and as you approach the station, mileage will count down. But we're not going to need that for this flight, and we're just going to leave it on flight management system and GPS. This is sensors, ADC. So your computer, ADC is an essential avionics component found in aircraft. This computer, rather than individual instruments, can determine the calibrated airspeed, Mach number, altitude, attitude, trend data from the aircraft's pitot static system on the outside. So it sends information and the computer analyzes it and helps provide that information to the flight management system. So there's two computers on board here apparently, and select two, go back. Now the AHRS settings, that's the AHRS, an attitude and heading reference system. It consists of sensors on 3 axes that provide attitude information for the aircraft, including roll, pitch, and yaw. These are sometimes referred to as MARG sensors and consist of either solid state or micro electromagnetic systems, gyroscopes, accelerometers, and magnetometers. They are designed to replace traditional mechanical gyroscope flight instruments. Once again, you click the back button to get back. So that more or less completes the soft keys on the flight management system. This is your airspeed indicator, and this is your altitude indicator. We have our barometric pressure, we have our course, heading. Got a little warning here that the parking brake's on. So let's take a look at the multifunctional display. So on our multifunctional display, we have our torque, our props right now, our NG, and ITT. There's our oil pressure, oil, temperature, and intercept is on, parking brake is flashing because it's on, and of course if you're going to take off you don't want that on. PT is an interstage turbine temperature, and that's the abbreviation for it. It's the temperature of the exhaust gases between the high pressure and the low pressure turbines. The gas temperature is measured by a number of thermocouples mounted in the exhaust system and is presented on a flight deck gauge in either degrees Fahrenheit or degrees Celsius, and here we have degrees Celsius. So I think you remember when they talked about the, you don't want that to get too high. Of course, it looks okay right now, but remember when they said this is engaged, that often it will increase the ITT temperature because of the restrictions within the turbo. Alright, so over here we have cabin pressure, information, fuel quantity, which you're going to check, your amps, your volts, and trims. There's your elevator and your flaps and your rudder. So I think that pretty much covers it. The only thing now we can take a look at is a flight plan, creating an actual flight plan with this thing. And let's just go to multifunctional display and click on flight plan, and we got some options here, and it says delete flight plan. So if I delete that flight plan, I'll say okay, it's gone now, so we can create a flight plan. Now the flight plan that we had so this is how you could, on little nav map, create a flight plan and say if you want to reproduce this and enter it into the aircraft, rather than going up here and exporting it as a Microsoft flight plan and then bring it into flight plan. So here's our departure, our destination, our in-between waypoints, and the runway we want. So let's do that. So origin is KMCN. Either that's the right airport, so you just press enter. So now I'm going to add my destination, which is Kilo Charlie Sierra Gulf. Just press enter. Columbus, that was right. Now we're going to add the waypoints. So Bravo, Yankee, Romeo, Oscar, Echo, hit enter, and that looks good. So we've got that waypoint. So we can add another waypoint, the next one that we had created with little nav map. And now we're going to have to scroll down. Add another waypoint. The next one was Pratt's. And another waypoint. Next one was Cancer. RSVLT. Okay, so you see we're getting our various distances to these waypoints. Next is Charlie, Foxtrot, Delta, Romeo Papa. Another waypoint, and this is the last one. FE NIX Foxtrot Echo November India X-ray. Now we have a choice here. Do we want the one in Japan or the US? Okay, so that's done. So we have that done. So just going to click done, and then I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go to procedures now, and we have to select. This is what we want here. At runway 6 is what we had, and remember we had that minimums set already, so we're going to load that, say OK. So now we have that, so I'm just going to go back again, and now let's look at the procedures. You can see it's in there. So let's go back, and let's look at our flight plan again. So now it's entered the altitudes, and you could see this is the altitude for this final waypoint before we get to the runway. And of course, let's just check, go home here, let's just check to make sure the frequency is still active. Yeah, so that's the frequency for that runway. So if I click on that, you can see that's the active frequency for runway number 6. Pop-ups get in the way, but you can disable those, but I kind of like to have them on. Just have to live with them. So that pretty much covers it. We could now taxi on out, and I want to thank you for joining me on this overview of the cockpit. It's rather complicated, and it's just for Microsoft Flight Sim, but in the real world, of course, it's a lot more complicated. There's more steps to doing it. So this is just for Microsoft Flight Sim, how you would do it to get her up and running, and just familiarize yourself with this aircraft. Now the PTOTs, those are little instruments on the outside that send information to the computer that we talked about. That's on board, and those are little things like these right here. These are little sensors that can send information to the onboard computers to help the flight management system. So beautiful aircraft, $4 million. I think that engine's worth around $1 million all by itself. The turboprop engine, they're very reliable. So thank you very much. I'll catch you next time, Flight Simmers.